Hi there guys, I hope you are having a good day. Now Anthony Joshua said something interesting about Oleksandr Usyk, along with saying that he's serious and that's what he needs is serious contenders, but he also said that Oleksandr Usyk is just as good as Tyson Fury, just as good of a competitor and adversary for him in the ring. Now, I know that Tyson Fury is a natural heavyweight and Usyk is a natural cruiserweight, and that of course is the gap that is going to be bridged in this heavyweight contest because Usyk is coming up. Anthony Joshua is also a natural heavyweight, which does make it, I guess that does make Anthony Joshua the favourite due to the fact that the dimensions are different. AJ has the height, the reach, the power, and technically he's a very good boxer. Usyk has to somehow bridge that gap, and he's good enough to be able to do it, technically. When you look at it like that, and the achievements of Oleksandr Usyk, then when it comes down to a skill level, yes, he is just as good as Tyson Fury. The guy is a technically gifted boxer, he's incredible, and he's an amazing athlete as well. Down at cruiserweight, you have to wonder, who could beat him? Tony Bellew done extremely well in their contest, but it was just too much for him. Usyk was shifting through the gears and ended up getting the stoppage. As Tony Bellew was getting tired, Usyk was only getting stronger, and that just shows how much of an incredible athlete he is alongside his boxing ability, because very few amount of fighters have that, the boxing ability where they are technically sound, a good chin, a good jab, good movement, good speed, and also they have the endurance to go rounds. If you look at someone like David Haye, down at cruiserweight again, there were going to be few fighters that would be able to beat him. Up at heavyweight, he has to try and bridge that gap as well as Usyk when it comes to size. But David Haye would often have these moments where he would get tired, he would struggle with his endurance. Not really badly, but there would be a difficulty in there for David Haye. But Usyk doesn't have that. We haven't seen that in Usyk. No, he doesn't necessarily have the punching power, but he's not someone who is going to make mistakes because he gets tired. Now, he does get hit, and we saw that in the Tony Bellew fight. He didn't like taking punishment from Tony Bellew because otherwise he would have gotten to him sooner, but Tony Bellew was able to keep him at bay, keep him at range, and at times he was the one dictating the distance and the pace of the contest, even though Usyk was pressing forwards, even though he was using those angles that he is so brilliant with. Tony Bellew still managed to slow things down at times, and he was dictating certain parts of the contest. If he did not have that punching power, then it would have been so much more difficult for Tony Bellew. But in the end, ultimately, Usyk was able to get to him. Now, regardless of that, coming up to heavyweight, there is going to be more power for Usyk to deal with in AJ, because AJ does punch a lot harder than Tony Bellew. It's a different league. So there are going to be those obstacles to overcome. But if you look at Usyk as a cruiserweight, Tyson Fury as a heavyweight, if you look at their skill level, pound for pound, then you can say yes, Usyk is technically gifted. He's an incredible boxer. His skills are probably even more polished than Tyson Fury's, because Tyson Fury is a good boxer, but a lot of what he is able to do ties into his size, reach, and his weight as well. He can move incredibly well, considering he is 6'9" and weighs 19 stone. He would move well for someone who's 6'4", yet he's 6'9". So if you factor that in, someone who is that big, that heavy, he isn't the biggest of punchers, but he punches hard enough to get the respect of his opponents. And he seems to always be able to find a way to get the victory. So if you look at it like that, and then there is that size as well, then Tyson Fury is a difficult opponent. Someone who is extremely hard to navigate, and someone who is extremely hard also to land clean on, because he does move well, he's elusive, doesn't get caught with too many clean punches. So if you match him up with Usyk on their technical ability, on their boxing ability, then they are around the same ballpark. Probably Usyk is more advanced, as I said, but Usyk doesn't share the size that Tyson Fury has. The size is what makes it even more difficult for opponents in there with Tyson Fury. Look at Deontay Wilder. Could Tyson Fury have implemented those two different styles and game plans if he didn't have the size. In the first fight, he was able to move. His jab was dictating certain parts of the contest, his elusiveness, also his footwork, and the fact that he can move well for a big guy. But Deontay Wilder cannot get careless because Tyson Fury is bigger than him, stronger, punches hard enough, as I said, to get his respect. We saw that in the 12th round when he backed Deontay Wilder up. That was probably when he noticed how to beat Deontay Wilder. Put him on the back foot, put the front foot fighter on the back foot, don't allow him to set his feet, then he can't use his power against Fury. So in the rematch, Tyson Fury again had the weight, had the size, had the jab, had the movement, had it all to be able to put Deontay Wilder on the back foot. That also tied in to his physical advantages over his opponent. So you can see in two different contests with two different styles, Tyson Fury was still able to come out on top, and that is down to his boxing ability, yes, but also his physical advantages over his opponents. Now, of course, I'm not saying that Tyson Fury's achievements are all tied into just that. I'm not saying that it's just because he's a big guy, it's just because he was gifted with long reach and being able to carry a little bit of extra timber over his opponents. I'm not saying that because if that was right, then look at someone like Valuev. I mean, I know that he was heavyweight champion, but still, I mean, how would he rank alongside someone like Klitschko, AJ, Tyson Fury himself? And, I mean, if that was true, then Lee Harrison's a pretty big guy. So you would say that, okay, he's a pretty big guy, so he should be able to conquer the heavyweight division. Doesn't come down to that. There is more involved. So just because Tyson Fury has those advantages, he needs to be able to use them and utilize them, also making them count against the opponents he's in there with. That is what he is able to do extremely well. When someone has something like that, an advantage, they need to be able to use it. They also need to have the boxing ability and have spent the time learning to be able to implement it. Look at someone like Deontay Wilder. He is light, but he can punch extremely hard. Now, he has utilized that in the past because that has been the only thing he's able to do. He gets outboxed by the likes of Gerald Washington, lower level fighters, he gets outboxed by them, but he finds the big punch, and he's always able to find it. But he couldn't against Tyson Fury. Well, he did, but it didn't work. So what does he do then? How else does he use his physical advantages, his punching power, and his reach, his size? Being a lighter guy, you would expect him to be able to move quite well for a heavyweight, but still he is unable to do that. He's quite flat-footed. He hasn't really learned how to box. So imagine someone with that kind of punching power who can box as well. Say AJ. AJ is a powerful puncher, hits hard with both hands, and he can box as well. If he couldn't, he wouldn't have beaten Ruiz in the second fight, and he wouldn't be able to stick there with the likes of Vladimir Klitschko, Alexander Povetkin. So he is proving that he is able to do multiple things and adapt based off of his opponent and adapt in fights as well. That is extremely important. Going back to Deontay Wilder, he hasn't necessarily learned how to adjust. He's learned to stick in there, keep going, keep plugging away, and then wait for his opportune moment to land the big punch. But at elite level, that is never going to work because he can punch very hard, but he needs to be able to set his feet in order to do that. He needs to be given time in order to set himself up. He also needs an opponent who fights a certain way, who doesn't show him angles and moves like a Tyson Fury. That makes it much more difficult for someone like Deontay Wilder, someone who waits for him to throw that kind of punch, not someone who's closing him down and not allowing him the space and the time to set his feet. That is what Tyson Fury done in the second fight, taking away that right hand. Even though Deontay Wilder landed it at certain points, there wouldn't have been the same kind of power because he was unable to have that time he needed to set his feet. You look at Deontay Wilder now, moving, throwing combinations. Those combinations won't have the same power in them as that big one-punch right hand. He's known as someone who has one big right hand, but if you look at the way he sets himself before he throws it, then compare that to him now, you can see the difference in his stance and how he throws the punches. If he is putting punches together, they will not have the same power as one, because with that one punch he sets his feet, he winds up and punches through the target. He is not doing that when throwing combinations because he's never done that during his career. He has one big punch, he needs to try and build something off of that, not necessarily start by throwing combinations because he's not a type of fighter who is able to do that. I mean, if he was starting out, yes, there are adjustments he can make, but he is the fighter he is, so he has to build off what he already has, not necessarily go right back to the beginning. He could do that if he was going to build his way back up, but he cannot do that by going back in there with Tyson Fury. What he needs to do by going back in there with Tyson Fury is build off the things he already has, not go back to the beginning, and that could be the problem for Deontay Wilder. But anyway, that is going off on a tangent a little bit, but you can see how a fighter might have physical advantages, but it is also about utilising those. So going back to what AJ said about Usyk and Tyson Fury, I would say he's right. I mean, would you put Usyk as lower than Tyson Fury? Would you say that Tyson Fury is more technically gifted, he's a better boxer? No, you wouldn't. You would just say he's an extremely good natural heavyweight. He's an incredible fighter and can do incredible things based off of his size. You would not expect someone who is that big to be able to move and be as fast and elusive as Tyson Fury is, yet he is able to do it. So he can be as good as Usyk, but there are other things he can do. Styles make fights, that's what they always say. Usyk is a different style to Tyson Fury. But nevertheless, it's still going to make for an entertaining contest when Anthony Joshua gets in there with him on September 25th. Anyway guys, what are your thoughts on this? Make sure you leave your thoughts in the comments below. Also leave a like and grab that subscribe button. Thanks guys.